Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. And let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Andy Swan, co-founder at LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Andy.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a travel theme today. Fits right into our narrative here with Delta Airlines ahead of earnings. And, you know, Kevin made a good statement earlier. It seems like in one of the best, scenarios for the travel industry, especially airlines, these stocks are just lagging, and it's kind of bewildering here a little bit. What kind of data out of LikeFolio do you have? Is it commensurate with, the lagging stock prices?
Yeah, it is. It's actually really a very mixed picture. I think, ironically, we're finally to the point here in 2023 where the airlines are actually coming up against some pretty tough comps on a year-over-year basis, because if you remember, last year was really that pent-up travel demand coming into the market. There were a lot of people last year that hadn't taken a vacation or gone anywhere, or even business travel, for a couple of years. And so that all came kind of into the market over 1 or 2 quarters in 2022, which gives airlines, pretty tough comps on a year-over-year basis as things kind of normalize. From a competitive standpoint, I really think when we look at Delta, that is the company in this group that we like the most. It's the company that consumers seem to like the most. And it looks like the biggest beneficiary of all of Southwest's troubles. Southwest really kind of gave up its top position in terms of happiness over the last year. I think we've talked about it on this show a couple of times, that flippening that occurred where Southwest used to be the most loved airline, now very much near the bottom because they just can't keep people on time or on schedule. A lot of cancellations, a lot of problems, as everybody knows. And it looks like out of that bunch of people that are leaving Southwest, or at least distancing themselves from it, Delta is the carrier that is probably picking up most of that business. So there's nothing really to love about the airline industry right here, we don't think. We think most of these stocks are priced about right, but in terms of a long-term view, there's definitely been a shift, and Delta, from a consumer happiness and loyalty perspective, is clearly coming out on top.
Andy, one of the points that I brought up in our opening segment and your happiness, your consumer happiness comparison graph really shows what I was talking about in visual form, which is American is not Delta, is it? I mean, American has always had kind of poor overall numbers and a poor balance sheet, less quality performance than some of these other airlines. And Delta, along with Southwest, that has lost that position, has always been near the top, right? So the question is, with a downgrade like this, like we got from American today, should you sell Delta based on that downgrade? Because Delta, as your data shows, is not American.
No, it's not American, and Delta's winning. So I think that there's all the reason in the world to downgrade, American. It's bottom of the pile, like you said, for a multitude of reasons. It has been for a long time. Delta is the better company. It's the better airline. It's the better experience for customers. There's always so much in these, as you go into earnings with airlines, there's so many facets to this. There's, capacity, there's, ticket pricing, there's cost of energy, or I don't know if it's called gasoline, jet fuel costs and that sort of thing, that all come into play. So it's a really complex situation to figure out. So at LikeFolio, we really like to boil it down to, who do customers like flying with, and do we expect that to continue? And for now, the answer is Delta overwhelmingly over the competition, and we do expect that to continue.
Yeah, and Andy, your year-over-year chart that you guys sent us, booking a cruise, we're talking RCL in the next segment, but it seems like some of the leisure travelers are pulling back, taking a trip or pulling back. American came out and stated that they saw some weakening demand moving forward. Is that a concern for the whole industry as inflation, those lagging effects of inflation, might be taking hold as, airfare prices are just, continuing to move higher?
Yeah, it's a tough ticket to buy. I think anybody that I talk to, it's just a different animal than it was a year ago or even pre-pandemic, where you could get places for $150, $250 round trip pretty frequently. Now it feels like a lot of those prices are $450 to $600 for a lot of people in a lot of places, and that is absolutely a factor, especially as the consumer overall is tightening their belt and watching their spend a lot more closely than they were a year ago. So it'll be interesting to see if the airlines can continue to maintain these high ticket prices. I think when Delta reports, they're probably going to have to admit that the pricing power they've had over the past year is probably going away.
Yeah, and one of the key things for Delta is that they own a refinery that they bought in 2012, so their margins are better. But you guys have an earnings score going into this report tomorrow morning?
Yeah, we're neutral on it, but I think from a macro perspective, the risk is probably more to the downside. I think it's easier to justify selling all of these names than it is to justify buying them. So officially neutral, but if I had to pick a direction, I think it probably gets a little bit of a pullback on this report, and especially the outlook.
Yeah, and it's already gotten a nearly 2% pullback today. All right, great stuff and great data as usual, Andy. Appreciate it. That's Andy Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down the data for us here on Delta Airlines. Kev,